back from the lunch. I hope that you all had a nice break. I hope that you're able to stretch your legs and move around a little bit, and that you have come back this afternoon ready for what I think is going to be a fantastic session, because I get to talk for a tiny bit, and then you get to hear directly from a couple of our Schoolhouse Connection scholars who are people that I care a lot about and respect a lot, and I think that you're going to have the opportunity to learn a lot from them. So let me just fill you in on how the next, 45 minutes or so of your time today will go, and then how the rest of the day will go. We're going to start with a session on supporting the resilience of students experiencing homelessness. And of course, you will get to hear from a couple of our Schoolhouse Connection scholars. After that, we're going to have breakout sessions again, and you'll have the opportunity to choose your own room again, just like we did in the morning. We'll have one session on supporting young children experiencing homelessness. And then we'll have another session on supporting higher education access and success. So you'll have the opportunity to jump into a breakout room, and then we will wrap up by 3 o'clock. So that's what we have in store for you for the rest of the day. And without further ado, let me jump into supporting the resilience of students experiencing homelessness. So what I'm going to do over the next few minutes is share some very basic resilience science with you. Some ideas about how we can nurture resilience in our work and even in our personal lives and relationships. And then, of course, we will have the opportunity to hear from a couple of our Schoolhouse Connection scholars. If you're not aware, I know Karen mentioned this earlier, we do have a youth leadership and scholarship program at Schoolhouse Connection. This application is open right now, and it's not a very difficult application. So even though it's due in a few days, if you have students who you think might be eligible, they do still have time to apply. And we're going to hear from Juan and Azarette, who are a couple of our scholars going back a few years, as well as a new scholar. So we will hear from them shortly. But what I want to start out with, like I said, is just a little bit of information about resilience. And at the most basic level, I know some of us are visual learners, so I kind of like to represent resilience as a frog jumping. A little frog has those teeny tiny spindly little legs, if you've ever seen a frog, which I think most of us have. But those legs are super powered. Frogs can jump, way higher than they are, much further than you would think when you look at their size. They can be rocket launchers. And since our work is all about the acronyms with FERPA and IDEA and ARP and all that stuff, I turned this into an acronym, which is Fostering Resilience, Opportunities, and Growth. We really all have a part to play in nurturing resilience in the students we work with, in our own families, and even in ourselves. So I want to start out by asking you to take a minute to just reflect on your own resilience. I think sometimes we think about this when we think about children and families that we work with, and we don't think about our own resilience that we all have. So what I'd like to ask you to do is just take a minute, think about times in your life that have been tough for you, that have been challenging for you. It might be something you're going through right now. It might be something you've gone through in the past. And just kind of put yourself in that space of going through a very challenging or difficult time. And then think a little bit about who or what helped you get through that time. And I'd like you to write this down. This is not to share. Don't put it in the chat or anything. This is just for you personally on a scrap of paper that you might have next to you, is to write down when you're going through these really tough, challenging times. What is your go-to to help you find strength to get through them? Is it a person? Is it an activity? Is it a memory? Is it a place? What is something or someone or somewhere that fosters your own personal resilience? And just think about that for a second, and write down a word or a couple of words or a sentence that you think about that really helps keep you jumping on your little legs when you feel like the whole world is just kind of squashing you down. And we'll come back to this later, but again, this is personal for you. I'm not going to ask you to share it. Okay, now that you've thought a little bit about your own personal resilience, let's kind of jump a little bit back into what is resilience and what does the science say. There's a large body of research on this. I'm sure many of you have studied this and know a lot more about it than I do, and certainly more than I can share in the next 5 minutes, but I'm just going to give you kind of a high level summary here. So we know that resilience is based on brain science, and it's really about how the thinking part of your brain in the prefrontal cortex is able to soothe and moderate that fight or flight part of your brain that I never really know how to point to this one. It's in the amygdala, kind of in the middle of your brain. When the amygdala is in charge, we're kind of like that amygdala frog. We're like, oh, we're not really able to see the world as calmly as we'd like. We're not able to make, the most well thought out rational decisions, perhaps. And so really how well that prefrontal cortex frog is able to keep the amygdala frog a little bit calmed down and under control is really what resilience is. We know that's a moving target. It can change over the course of our lives. It can change over the course of a day, depending on the different kinds of stress that we might be under. And we also know that we can develop this resilience at any time in our lives. Even somebody like me with all this great gray hair, I'm still working on developing and nurturing my own resilience. And I can still do that. I can still improve that about myself. Of course, we know that children can adopt these changes more quickly because their their neuroplasticity is a little bit more active than ours, perhaps at the age of somebody like myself, but we can do it too. So what are some characteristics of resilient people according to the science? 4 kind of key points here. Resilient people tend to be socially competent, which means that they're fun to talk to at a party. They're responsive, they're adaptable, they're caring and funny, and they can use that social competence to develop relationships that can, again, help to nurture their resilience, so that can become kind of a positive cycle. Resilient people tend to have good problem-solving skills. They know how to ask for help, they know how to get the help they need, and they're creative and can get out of a jam. Now, they might not always come up with the solution that we think is the best or most positive solution, but they can come up with a solution in the moment to get through a particular challenge they might be facing. Resilient people tend to be self-aware, which means they know who they are and they can resist negative messages that they hear about themselves. That's really important. And we know that resilient people tend to have a sense of purpose, a sense of personal goals, and a belief that they can achieve those goals, a belief in a brighter future, and kind of hope that things will get better for them and that they kind of have the power to help that to happen in their lives. So again, these are characteristics that ebb and flow. The most resilient person some days is not going to be nice to talk to. They're not going to have good problem-solving skills. They're not going to be hopeful. But generally speaking, these are some characteristics that we see. So now let me hit you with my 4 resilience rules, and then I'm going to turn this over to Azeret and to Juan, who I've seen have entered the meeting with us a little while ago. So the first rule that I want to say for you is resilience is the rule, not the exception. And just as an example about this, I don't know how many of you have seen, I see this every spring around May. There tends to be all of these stories in the media about, students who have overcome tremendous challenges and they're graduating from college and from high school, they've got a 4.0, they're going to some fabulous college. And these are wonderful stories. And these are stories that should be celebrated. I love reading about them. But sometimes I also find them kind of disturbing, because I feel like they create this idea of, wow, that is such an amazing person and so unusual. And I wish more kids could be like that. And I think it helps us to think that resilience is something that's really rare and unusual, and it's not something that we can really hope for or expect from most people. And really what the science has shown is that is actually not true at all. Resilience is the rule. It is not the exception. There have been a lot of long-term, international, cross-cultural, interdisciplinary studies that have shown that, for example, for children who grow up in the most challenging conditions that you can imagine, in war-torn countries, in refugee camps, is more than half, and usually closer than 70% of those young people growing up in those conditions overcome the odds, and they lead very successful lives as adults. So resilience is something to be celebrated and really valued. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing, but it is not miraculous. And it is something that we can expect, and it is something that we can nurture and promote and build in the students that we work with, the parents that we work with, and in our own families and our own, personal lives. So that's one thing to please keep in mind. Second thing is, this is not in the genes. Everyone is born with innate resilience, and everyone can develop that resilience further as adults. Research, again, has proven this. We all have the capacity and the tools to build up our resilience. Now, those tools can be kind of taken away from us, and their efficacy can be limited over time based on the conditions that we might grow up in, or the relationships that we might have in our lives. But at the same time, when the conditions change, or when we can build even one positive and strong relationship of somebody to help mentor us and nurture our resilience, we can switch that around and we can start learning the behaviors, thoughts, and actions that comprise resilience. Third thing, definitely please remember this: resilient people are not superheroes. They are not superhuman. All of the students and families you're working with that you're thinking, wow, what a resilient young person or what a resilient parent, they break down and they need help and they need support, just like we all do, just like every one of us does. So, you know, overcoming homelessness and poverty and the stress that might happen on any given day or hour with the families that we work with, that is something that is constantly a challenge, no matter how resilient a person is. And that brings me to my last rule, which is that there are many, many specific and actually really easy things that we can each do each day to foster resilience in the classroom, in the school district, in our own families and communities. I have a few that I want to share with you, but I think it's much more important and much more valuable for you to hear from our expert panel on their ideas of what you can do, particularly in the school environment, to help nurture and foster resilience in students that you work with. So I would like to ask Azeret and Juan, please, to unmute yourselves and just say a quick hi for me, just so that I know you're there and we can all hear you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey. So welcome. I appreciate you both taking the time out of your really busy days to be with us today. As I said, Azeret and Juan are both Schoolhouse Connection scholars. Azeret is also a peer leader in our Schoolhouse Connection program, which means that she helps to provide support and mentorship to some of our younger scholars. So we're really lucky. Hey?
They, them pronouns, please. Thank you.
Sorry, I apologize, Azeret. I knew that, and that's totally my bad. They are one of our peer leaders and are providing support to our scholars, our younger scholars who have just come on board with us over the past year or two, and particularly got to travel with our scholars post-pandemic this year. So welcome to Azeret and welcome to Juan. I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, and I'm also going to lead off with a question. So when I ask this question, I'll ask that you just, whoever wants to answer first, and anybody can just jump in. If we have a moment of awkward silence while you figure out who wants to go first, we're perfectly fine with that. So I'm going to let you all decide who wants to jump in and answer first. But what I'd like you to do is just, introduce yourselves, however you would like to do that, and let us know a little bit about why education is important to you.
Esther, would you like to go first?
You go first, Juan.
Okay, for sure. So my name is Juan Valdez. I'm a 2022 Schoolhouse Connection Scholar. I'm currently in Harvard University, class of 2026. And as for the question, why is education important to me? Education, for me, is kind of like a weapon for students. In a way, it is playing kind of catch up to society, but in another sense, it is a foundation for a greater future. Whether a student decides to go to college in the future or not, it doesn't mean that education should be denied to them, or at least made more difficult to have an education just because of their background. There is a quote from Malcolm S. Forbes that I like that says, the purpose of education is to replace an empty mind with an open one. And I believe just that education is a tool for students to, of course, learn the material, but also an opportunity to learn from the perspectives of others and create this open-minded environment.
Hi, I'm Azeret EHCY. I was a 2018 Schoolhouse Connection Scholar. I just graduated from Indiana University with a BS in psychology and minors in sociology and criminology. I'm getting ready to go to graduate school. So obviously education must be important to me. And I think I really started to realize the importance of education early on in my life. As a child, I realized it gave me the opportunity to see the world differently. It gave me the opportunity to think of new futures that I'd never thought of. And as time went on, my love for education grew because opportunities grew, much like Juan was saying. And at the end of the day, I realized we are all blank slates and we are shaped every day by what we choose to have in our lives. And I choose education. I choose new. I choose more. I choose to be an amalgamation of as much as I can be. So that's why education is important to me.
Thanks, Azeret, and thanks, Juan. Wow, you're already like, you just started talking and you both have me sort of speechless. I'm just going to look at my paper and focus on what I'm supposed to do here. So my second question for you both is, when you were experiencing homelessness in the past, can you talk to us a little bit about any problems that you may have run into enrolling in school, attending school, participating in activities? Just what kinds of problems and challenges did you face with just your regular school attendance, whether that was elementary, middle, or high school?
So I could start again. At least for me, fortunately, I didn't have many problems attending or enrolling to school, at least not just because of homelessness. It was more of a combination between my immigration status, learning how to speak English, and the homelessness situation that did make it a bit more difficult to start participating in school activities, but it was definitely not impossible. I did require a lot of help because I didn't know where to start. My parents were here in the country, and my grandmother was the one who took us into her house. And after a week or so, she kicked us out. So the problem was that my grandma was my guardian in front of the school. So it definitely made it a bit awkward when having to go and see her to sign papers, knowing that she had left us without a home for a while. So more than problems with enrolling and attending school, there were internal problems happening at home. And we also had no cars. I had to walk to school, and the language barrier did not allow me to enroll in honors or AP classes for 2 years. So it was definitely a combination of the three things that made it a bit harder to start getting involved in school activities and clubs and like these honor and AP classes and even the IB curriculum.
Thanks, Juan.
I think a similar sort of situation where transience and internal domestic conflict really made it difficult to sort out education and extracurriculars and same thing, honors programs and such. Luckily, I was eventually able to get into those classes I wanted to be into. I got moved to schools that I needed to be into with quite a bit of effort. And most specifically towards the end of high school, and getting into higher education, the issue became documentation. It became as simple as I didn't have medical records, and it became as difficult as finding the paperwork that said I had ever been in foster care or I had ever been homeless in the first place. And then when I realized I couldn't find those, okay, then it became an issue of finding the person who could help me find those and who would be able to sign off on new documentation. And especially with the crowd that I'm speaking to now, there's so much fear in looking for social services, and there's so and it also seems shrouded in a lot of stigma. So that really became the final hurdle, and probably one of the biggest was finding the people that could help me once I realized I could not help myself.
Thank you, Azra. Thank both of you for that one. So in addition to some of the problems that you had with, accessing school and certainly getting documents and getting things signed, can you tell us about any other problems that you are having outside of school that also obviously complicate your ability to get your education? So things that might be related to housing, food, or other needs.
Yeah, so again, let's start. So after my grandma had kicked us out of the house, she lived in a mobile home, by the way. We had to sleep anywhere we could for a couple of days. And then my aunt, which ironically lived 5 houses away from my grandma, she took us in to sleep in her living room. And it was another 1-bedroom mobile home that 6 people had to share. It was my 2 cousins, my aunt, and my parents and I. So my parents were fortunate enough to find a job. My mom cleaned houses with a neighbor, and my dad worked at a car wash the whole day while I went to school. So they paid my aunt's rent with that money. Food was kind of sparse sometimes, but my parents never let me be aware of this. It wasn't until I was kind of like in senior year where we had a more stable situation that I kind of looked back and noticed all these little things that my parents would do. Sorry for the noise. We have the
Oh.
fire station nearby.
No problem.
But yeah, so they never let me be aware of this. And then the lack of space, the privacy, transportation, or even just the proper housing accommodation were some of the problems that we ran into as a family during the homelessness. So.
Thanks, Juan.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, sure. What were some other problems that you experienced that were not specifically in school or related to school? So issues with housing, food, maybe access to healthcare or other needs.
Yeah. My particular situation had a lot of medical issues going on, both physical and mental health issues going on that either myself or other family members that I was moving around with just were completely unable to deal with, could not access care. And my younger sibling was potentially like going to have to go see specialists to get better care for physical ailments. And so the general statement would just be stress in the family. It drains the finances, and it drains your mental resources, and then we can all kind of see the snowball of where it goes when you're already dealing with a family that has some housing insecurity, has financial insecurity. It gets very difficult quickly. And when the foundation of your pyramid is falling apart, the relationships, those higher order relationships that would normally be included in that pyramid, they start to fall apart, and they themselves become very toxic. And so I lost a social net when I was young, and that was a very scary experience that I had to figure out how to overcome before getting into higher education.
Thanks, Ezra. That's all very, very real and kind of gets us to the point of what I wanted to ask you all next, which is throughout all of these different challenges that you both were going through, related to relationships, related to basic needs, related to education, how did your school help you? What were some things, or maybe even hopefully at least one thing that your schools did that was helpful?
So personally, I would be lying if I were to say that school did nothing for me, because besides my parents and siblings, school was everything I had. And now that I think about it, there were 3 main things from school that I could consider that were my main support systems while in high school. The first one was marching band, and it was definitely the biggest one. I met incredible people, bonded with them like no other, and had some of the most amazing experiences with my friends there. So that kind of handled like the whole mental health situation that I was going through. Teachers were the second biggest support system. In specific, my Ivy diploma teachers, who always pushed me to do the best that I could and to pursue my dreams, which I will talk about later. And most importantly, to never give up on them. And there, again, another quote that is actually my favorite. It's from the book of The Alchemist. That says, the possibility of having a dream come true is what makes life interesting. And my teachers definitely showed me how to hang on to that dream. And so far, it has been what makes my life all worth it. Like all these dreams and little goals that I put to myself, and I focus on accomplishing them. And school, and specifically my teachers, like I was talking about, they were the ones who pushed me to reach up higher and achieve those dreams.
Juan, can I ask you to tell everybody what instrument you played in marching band?
Yeah, so initially I played the drums, but then I switched over to the front ensemble where I played vibraphone and marimba, and I got to be front ensemble captain for my last 2 years.
Very cool. Thank you. Azarette, how about you? What did your school that helped you?
Wasn't in marching band, but I was in band, so extracurriculars were super awesome. And I think my particular story is that I had absolutely no care at all from the social services at my school or in my district until a few months into my senior year, because I went prodding in the career center, asking the career center counselor for some information. And she started putting two and two together and was like, let me introduce you to somebody. And I finally met the McKinney-Vento liaison for the district. And after that, it was insane. It was smooth sailing. And when I mean smooth sailing, I mean, I had food. I got money for gas, because sometimes I was driving from my family's, like my aunt's house. That was a good 45-minute drive away from the school, but I always had to drive to school because I had extracurriculars, and I was definitely not going to miss out on those my senior year. And speaking of those extracurriculars, they got completely paid for the minute my McKinney-Vento liaison figured out what was going on. Like there were so many things, so many dominoes that fell into place, all because I was visible. And I can never underscore that enough. I felt so seen and so recognized, but I had been given none of that, no help at all, until that moment about October, my senior year of high school. It's interesting to think about what could have happened if there had been an intervention sooner. But I'm not mad because it turned out okay.
Well, I'm going to have a follow-up question for you on that later, Azarette, but for now, I'm going to stick to the script. And I want to ask you both, did your school do things that actually made it harder for you to attend and succeed? And like, don't be afraid to say it, even though we're talking to a lot of school staff, they need to know, what things actually can make it harder. So if there were things that really, where the school put challenges in your way that didn't need to be there, what were those?
I would like to go first, just because it builds off of what I was just talking about, Juan. Thanks. I felt as though I had always made it clear there were some, like I had to go take a form home to get signed, and I was always stressed, and I thought I had interacted with teachers, I thought I had interacted with staff, and I couldn't bring myself to say it, because I thought saying it would get me in trouble. I thought saying it would get CPS called, and CPS would be bad. So I found it very difficult that when the few times that I did give pushback, the few times when I was like, I can't get this signed, the few times I was like, no, I can't do that. I can't bring this in. I can't, whatever the situation may be. Even simple moments where I had like a bunch of junk food in my backpack all the time, and I would be constantly snacking because I was hungry all the time, and I'd steal a bunch of snacks from the cafeteria in the morning. And so even teachers being upset that I would always be snacking, or be upset that I was maybe falling asleep in class, or just every little bitty thing. And even big moments where I'd be at events and a classmate would comment that a classmate would tell a teacher or a staff member or the counselor supervising the club that I said something maybe questionable about my housing situation or about my own mental health. And I would be confronted by a teacher, or I'd be confronted by the school counselor. And it was ridiculously amazing how in each of those moments, I was kind of asked to fall in line instead of being asked to clarify, instead of being asked to explain, instead of being seen with a kinder eye and a more considerate eye. I was just told, fall in line. And I was a star student. So if a star student who generally did everything right couldn't even get cut a break, yeah, I think about this kind of stuff a lot.
Yeah. I don't want to talk too much because it's your time to talk, but yeah, I think that's really upsetting because all of those moments were opportunities to have connected you with your liaison years earlier and it didn't happen. And that's really not okay.
Yeah. So in my eyes, those are the things that really did make it harder just to keep on in school. Juan, what are you thinking right now?
For me, it was kind of a similar situation in the sense that I didn't get to connect with the people that I was meant to connect with until my senior year. But it definitely happened that, well, and this person in specific was my college counselor. Because in my school, we have the College and Career Center. And this college counselor, he was the one who helped me throughout the whole college application process. But something did happen my senior year, actually. I always had been to study in Canada in the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. And I looked for support at school from the counselors since they are regularly the ones who help students with applying to colleges. And I didn't know about the College and Career Center just yet. But when I sat down with my counselor to talk about studying in Canada, the first thing that she said to me was, Canada? Why so far? And I told her I was something along the lines of like, oh, because I really like it. And it has been my dream since freshman year. And now that I have the chance, I want to take it. And I was also involved in multiple extracurricular activities and the IB diploma. And I was actually the IB Questers president and many different things that kind of like put a good note in my curriculum. And it really hurt to see, or at least to hear from my counselor, because after I told her that I wanted it, that it was my dream and I wanted to take this chance, she told me, she was like, what does Canada have that the US doesn't, that the United States doesn't? And she then told me, she was like, watch what you wish for, because sometimes dreams are not what we think they are. And that was kind of just like a huge shot I took right into the heart. And maybe it didn't make it harder for me to attend school or succeed, but it definitely made me not want to seek help from those counselors anymore. And yeah, we can say that this was only one person, but actually she wasn't the only person who I heard this from either. I had various opportunities to meet with people directly from my school district, and most of them, not all, but most also replied with something that would put another needle into that dream. And maybe it was something unrealistic for them. But I did get accepted into the school and I did get financial aid, which is not enough for me to attend. But it was that dream and they kind of like shot it down, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Thanks to both of you for sharing that. I know that it can be really hard to talk about those negative things. And so I'm going to end. I'm going to have one last question for Azra, but this is my last sort of main question, which is kind of on a more positive note. You have 184, I think, school district and school building staff and professionals here who are really excited to hear from you. What would you like to tell them? What suggestions do you have for them about how they can support their McKinney-Vento students?
I saw somebody make a comment in the chat after Juan and I talking just now about how important it is to build real relationships with students and build true relationships with students. And I want to push further on that idea because I would argue my teachers thought they had true relationships with me. I would argue they thought I was a regular person just like anyone else, maybe just a little moody, like any other teenager though. And so I would say, yes, these true relationships, this true care, and of course, protect yourself. Of course, protect yourself, protect your own emotions. Don't ever get more involved than you can handle. But that caveat there, I think, is where a big disconnect happens, because people are aware they can't push themselves more than they're able. But it came down to not asking the hard questions, not making hard decisions. And so we got ask the hard questions, ask the questions you think you already know the answer to, but you really don't want to hear the answer to. And how far can I go? How far can I realistically push myself? What relationship is still comfortable and appropriate? And it's such a, like, there has to be a connection point, but I think for me, it often didn't connect. I think I had teachers and counselors who thought they knew me, thought they were friends with me. But in all those moments where they had to confront me because a student said I said something, or because they saw I wrote something down, things never escalated. Things never went farther because nobody asked hard questions. They took my responses without a grain of salt. They were very willing to just take the answer that was easiest and made it okay. So I'm sorry if I went a little bit off there. But
That was perfect. That was perfect, Ezra. Thank you. Juan, did you have something that you wanted to add about what schools can do to help?
Yeah, I actually came up with 3 different things. The first one is to be mindful of the situation of the students. And this is pretty obvious, but just being aware that their home situation might not be the only thing that they're dealing with puts you in another level. Nobody will be able to completely relate to the student, but you can get pretty close if you really acknowledge the situation they're in. If they're making events to students, they're most likely struggling through other conditions as well. The second thing, and this is a little bit more personal, kind of like tying it to the previous question, which is don't crush their dreams. It really would have definitely helped if my counselor told me that she would help me out with the college application. Who knows, maybe I would have been in Canada right now. And there's also a chain reaction that happens when students get told off from their dreams. It can make them not want to reach out for help anymore, and it might even make them to perform poorly in their academics because they find no joy in their dream anymore. And remember the quote, the possibility of having a dream come true is what makes life interesting. And the third one and the last one, check in on them every once in a while. It is as simple as just how are you holding up? Or if you don't want to ask the basic questions, you can also change it up a bit, which is something that I do with my friends. Instead of asking them how are they doing, I ask them, what color is your heart today? Or what are your top 3 feelings at the moment? Checking in on students can make the difference in the kind of connection they make with you as a staff member, and the confidence they feel to share, the confidence they will feel to share their situation. And sometimes staff is a great support system a student can have. So give credit to your position a bit more because they're of great importance.
I really love the point about not crushing dreams, because when you told that particular story, I was like, yeah, man, been there, where somebody looked at you and was like, okay, so are you set to graduate? Yeah, I am actually. I'm gonna do better than graduate. Dreams matter so freaking much. And looking at people as preformed people versus blank slates, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, the two of you are giving me all kinds of feelings, good ones. But I want to ask one last question, and I want to direct this to you, Azarette. And I'm probably a really great example of this question because using a person's chosen pronouns is something that's really important to me, and I messed that up with you today, and that is definitely not okay. And I appreciate the reminder. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about things that school staff should do and should say, and maybe should not do and not say, if they are working with a student who's talking to them about identifying as LGBTQ+.
When you sent this question in the email, I really had to sit there and think about it, because I've honestly been asked this question a lot of times, and the older I get, more it changes. Yes, happy National Coming Out Day. Great timing. But I think I was blessed to at least have a high school that had an LGBT pride club. But we ran into a lot of just, we don't do that here. We don't do that here. And being faced with hard stops conveys the message that you, as a person, as a counselor, and this would have been somebody speaking as like our advisor, our club advisor, having that attitude and having the, well, you just can't do that attitude was never helpful. But I respect the fact that as educators and as a school, you may have certain lines you can't cross. You may have certain things you're not supposed to say. And I have personally, I have no idea how wicked that position must be. So it goes back to the same, don't crush people's dreams. Be careful what you say. Because even saying something as, oh, I've never heard of that before, that's new. Oh, that's new. You may feel as though you're being inquisitive, but you may come off harsh and be like, oh, is that weird? Am I weird now? So, and if a student is considering, let me not get off track because it's just such a complicated subject. Less is more with the responses. It is important to be educated, but your student does not need to educate you. So if you don't understand what your student is talking about, don't add extra energy onto the situation. Figure it out in your own time. Don't add anxiety to the situation. But I mean that going back to the situation of, oh, we don't do that here, telling students they can't do some sort of celebration. You don't have to add to the situation by saying, oh, we can't do that. Figure out the best way to respond that's going to give them room for creativity, but also stay within the bounds of what your institution will allow you to do and allow them to do. And it's when we were looking for money because our club wanted to have our own closet, if you will, because some of our students wanted to be able to change clothes during the day. And we wanted to be able to have totes of clothes that our students could switch out every week at our club. And we were told just flat out, clubs don't get money for that. Well, this is a very unique question. This is a very unique situation. It doesn't have to be a hard stop, even if none of your clubs, even if none of your social clubs get money, there's a creative solution. That there is always a creative solution that works. I'm a firm believer of that. Because your students will come to you with these wild ideas, with these wild dreams of the identities that they want to have and the person that they want to be. And you're stuck being the adult that knows that this world kind of sucks. But there's always a way. inevitably one of the teachers at our school volunteered to like store the totes in one of her offices, and it all worked out. And we just pitched in clothes. We weren't able to buy clothes from Goodwill, but we pitched in clothes, and it was still the same net effect. We were very persistent though. I think are there any other things that I could say on that?
I think what you said is fantastic, Azeret. Yeah, I think that's great.
Cool.
I appreciate both of you so much. If we were in person, you could have a huge standing ovation and 200 people clapping for you, which, you know, we're on Zoom, so things are not the same. But I just feel like my whole body feels what you guys said. Like I almost can't even talk. Like I just am so grateful for your participation, both of you, for your honesty, for your wisdom, for your intelligence, for sharing what you shared with us. I think this was invaluable. I wish we had another hour to just keep talking with the two of you. I really just want to ask everyone right now on that piece of paper that you took out earlier, if you can think about what Azeret and Juan said, and if you can think of one thing, just one thing that you can do, or a way that you can interact with students and families, one thing that you learned from them that you think you can do over the course of this year, and just write that down and just come back to it. You know, resilience is not a program. This is not like an after-school resilience program. It's a process. It's about relationships. It's about believing in people's potential. It's about listening and being a good listener and an active listener. Looking for all those cues that Azeret talked about and engaging with those in a positive way, and providing opportunities for participation and contribution, and for young people to meet their dreams. That's really what fostering resilience is all about. And I think if we just take a minute to reflect on what we've heard over the past 25 minutes, Azeret and Juan gave us about 50 different things that we could do to help foster resilience. But if you can think of one and write that down and put it on your bulletin board, or put it in your purse, or somewhere that you can kind of come back to it and just think about it over the course of the year when things get really challenging and difficult, which obviously they will do, and they probably already are. I hope that that will be extremely helpful to you. I had planned to allow you all to ask some questions, but we kind of ran out of time for that. And I just think that what Azeret and Juan said was just so beautiful and so perfect that I think this is a perfect time for us to end. And again, thank you, Azeret. Thank you, Juan. I appreciate your time. I appreciate everything that you said so much. And I'm just really, really grateful to you both. So thank you so much. And I think it's time for me to turn it over to some breakout groups that you